Good morning. In any other year, we would traditionally be gathering in this historic gymnasium for Remembrance Day ceremony. It's a long-standing tradition in our school, but with the pandemic, we've adapted, so on November 11th, Remembrance Day, it now marks a full century since the end of fighting in the First World War in November, way back in 1918. We're unable to gather in one room for the ceremony, but I think we're all bound together today online in small cohort groups by grade to solemnly remember and to mark the legacy and sacrifices of previous generations through the conflict. I'm speaking to you from our school's historic Memorial Gymnasium, and I'm struck today, as I am every year, by lots of different feelings: gratitude, respect, awe, and appreciation of the enormous sacrifices made by earlier generations who were grads of this school and who studied here just like you, and who made enormous sacrifices for all of us. Today, our quiet time together in small groups takes on special meaning as we reflect on the pledge to offer true patriot love and to keep our true north strong and free. We have heard those lines sung hundreds of times in our national anthem. However, today in particular, we're reminded that freedom comes at a cost, an enormous cost, in lives and the destruction that war brought to battlefields, towns, and cities on foreign soil. Normally today, I would welcome many special guests to LCC as part of our extended community, and who like to remember with us together in this gym. But given the pandemic, that's not happening. Instead, I would like today to remember Mr. Allan Crawford from the class of 1939 as a representative of all the LCC alumni veterans. Mr. Crawford gave years of military service to Canada during the Second World War, and following the war, he attended many Remembrance Day services here in our campus, as he visited many classes to share his stories and to take questions from our students. He is only one of many LCC veterans, but in his consistent teaching role, he became a symbol of how important it is to remember. We appreciate his significant contribution to our students' learning about the Great Wars, and he is in our thoughts today as a representative of all who gave service. So students, I believe it's important to remind you every year that this memorial gym where I am standing, where we usually all gather, was built in 1922 to honor all LCC alumni who lost their lives in the First World War. All the funds for this gym came from LCC alumni in honor of their fallen brothers. The formal opening ceremony of this building was held here on a snowy winter evening in February of 1922, and it was presided over by a very significant VIP, the Canadian Governor-General, Byng, who had previously been a general in the Canadian Armed Forces and who had commanded our Canadian troops at the famed Battle of Vimy Ridge in April of 1917, where despite great odds, Canadians were successful, where the French and the British had not been earlier before. The inscription on these impressive plaques over my shoulder, over the oak doors behind me, were unveiled that day in 1922, and the main plaque states the following: "To the glorious memory of the old boys who gave their lives in the Great War, this gym has been erected." And today we think of them, and we consider all the LCC grads who served also in the Second World War and in the Korean conflict. In total, 76 LCC graduates lost their lives. Once again, I urge you to take quiet and personal time during your tenure here at LCC. Come to this gym, stop, look at these plaques, read them, and realize that you have a connection to each one of those young men, your LCC brothers, who had hopes and aspirations and dreams like yours. In total, some 300 LCC grads fought for Canada in the First World War, which was a rather striking number for what was then a rather small school. Today, we honor military personnel from Canada who have honorably served their country and defended the core values we continue to hold most dear today: freedom, equality, rule of law, civility. Also, we should also remember the more than 100 Canadian soldiers who have been killed while on UN peacekeeping missions all across the world since 1957. Among those deeply affected by the horror of the fighting in World War I was John McCrae, a Canadian Army Medical Corps officer who wrote the famous poem In Flanders Fields. He wrote it in 1915, just north of the town of Ypres, and in it, he actually makes references to imagery that have remained very powerful. It is said that he only took about 20 to 30 minutes to scratch it out on a piece of paper while he huddled in a damp and muddy trench. Yet his powerful poem has endured in Canadians' minds and hearts for a full century, and somehow capturing that special sentiment of remembrance that generations of Canadians have deemed very precious, and also making the poppy a striking symbol in Canada and actually now across the world. So today, more than a century after the writing of McCrae's poems, schools and communities across the country will recite in Flanders Field, often throughout Remembrance Week. And in coming together in this way, we're bound closer together in the importance of remembering the sacrifice of previous generations. Close to 10 million people lost their lives in the First World War that raged from 1914 to 1918. Now, more than a full century later, and other countries such as France, the UK, Russia, and others continue to take special measures, like us, to remember the extraordinary scale of human loss. Last June, the world marked the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War and the collapse of the fascist Nazi regime in Germany in May of 1945. Shortly thereafter, the United Nations was established in June of 1945. So this year marks the UN's Diamond Anniversary and warrants thoughtful discussion about the impact and future potential in maintaining the peace and as an organization dedicated to social justice. As time passes, naturally, I think that the realities of these two world wars and the scale of the sacrifice becomes more distant, especially for you, young people of our nation. So taking time today to pause, to reflect with intentionality takes on great meaning as the threads of shared memory become a little bit thinner in our practical day-to-day lives. In fact, I believe that remembering and reflecting actually takes on greater significance every year because of this, especially in an age where more democratic voices are being muffled abroad by autocrats, dictators, and strongmen who find their legitimacy from intimidation and pointing the barrel of a gun. Je crois que c'est important aujourd'hui de noter que le nombre de vétérans canadiens des deux guerres mondiales diminue chaque année. Pendant la Première Guerre mondiale, plus que 600 000 soldats étaient en service du Canada. Plus que 68 000 étaient tués et aujourd'hui, aucun vétéran de la Première Guerre mondiale reste vivant. Pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, plus qu'1 million de soldats étaient en service du Canada, 40 000 étaient tués et moins que 33 000 restent vivants aujourd'hui, avec un âge moyen de 93 ans. Chacun de ces vétérans porte des histoires personnelles importantes dans la vie militaire de leur sacrifice. Finally, we may not be able to gather together this morning or at any point this year, this fall, in one room. But as a community on this Remembrance Day, we are pausing and reflecting together. We are considering the enormous sacrifice of previous generations, the value of living in a country where peace and no armed conflict is our reality. We're thankful for the LCC alumni who made the ultimate sacrifice on our behalf. And remember, they opened windows and doors of opportunity for every single one of us. They should never be forgotten, and they should never be taken lightly. Non nobis solum, not for ourselves alone. Thank you.
Edgar Pattyson Black.
John Clontarf Kelvyn Carson.
Archer Ekers.
George Cyril Ray Hamilton.
Edward George Arthur Campbell Lane.
David Benedict Rennoldson.
Philip Ilderton Walker.
John English Brayley.
Reginald Waring Lindsay Crawford.
Robert Blair Esdaile.
William Mills Hamilton.
Kenneth Mathewson.
George Vosburgh Barker Sayers.
Harry Webb.
William Brooke.
Guy Melfort Drummond.
Bertram St. George French.
John Haines Hannaford.
John Nelson Burdette McKim.
Edwin Kerr Skelton.
Charles Hockett Carson Woods.
William Erskine Buchan.
Herrick Stevenson Duggan.
Robert Anderson Galt.
Ivan Charles Kinlock.
Hamnet Eardley Penny.
John Elliott Sutherland.
Kenneth Elgood Young.
Reginald Heber Bancroft Buchanan.
Kenneth Locke Duggan.
Ralph Gordon Hall.
Sidney James Leyland Bailey.
Frederick Orchard Cadden.
Charles C. Castles.
Robert C. Crawford.
William Ewart Nixon Field.
Bruce Douglas Hyman.
Lyle Basil Berman Price.
Frederick William Stewart.
James Russell Courtney Tyre.
John Brooks Beveridge.
Jeffrey Nigel Carfrey Campbell.
Douglas Horatio Chapman.
Charles Stewart Gibson Crombie.
George Climie Fraser.
David Sinclair Jacobs.
John H.M. Robertson.
Duncan O'Mahony Burway Taylor.
Robert White.
Massey Williamson Beveridge.
Robert Fleetwood Campbell.
James Campbell Clouston.
John Terrence Joseph Davis.
William Graham-Browne.
Frederick George Johnson.
Frederick Arthur Scott.
Hugh Boyd Thornton.
Richard Oliver Young.
James Dalton Bilkey.
William Angus Campbell.
Allan Crawford.
Douglas George Black Day.
Cecil George Hopton.
Leslie Warwick Jones.
Edward David Simon.
Leo Sarsfield Tobin.
Warren. Robert Zeller.
John Boyer Buckley.
Jeffrey Lee Caprio.
Ian McMillan Crawford.
Robert Bryson Duncan.
George James Hyman.
James Morrow Parker.
Thomas Angus McCoy Smith.
James Edward Troe.
Hugh Ross Cleveland.
Aux soldats morts par Émile Véraran. Vous ne reverrez plus les monts, les bois, la terre, aux yeux de mes soldats qui n'avaient que 20 ans et qui est tombé en ce dernier printemps, où plus que jamais, douce apparut la lumière. On n'osait plus songer au champ d'or que l'aube revêtait de sa gloire irisée. Seule, la sombre guerre occupait la pensée, quand, au fond des amants, on apprit votre mort. Depuis votre départ, à l'angle de la glace, votre image attirait, et le cœur et les yeux, et nul ne s'asseyait de l'escabeau boiteux, où tous les soirs, près du foyer, vous preniez place. Hélas, où sont vos corps jeunes, puissants et fous? Où sont vos bras, vos mains et les gestes superbes qu'avec la grande faux vous fassiez dans les herbes? Hélas, la nuit immense est descendue sur vous. Vos mères ont pleuré dans leurs chaumières closes. Vos amants ont dit leur peine aux gens du bourg. On a parlé de vous, tristement, tous les jours. Et puis, un soir de juin, on parla d'autre chose.
In Flanders Fields by John McCrae. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.